Welcome everybody to another episode of Getting APIs to Work. Today I'm here with Mike Amundsen, and I'm really happy that we spent some time together. So Mike was here at the O'Reilly Software Architecture Conference in New York. He gave a half-day tutorial on designing web APIs and designing and building web APIs. And then we had a book signing together today. That was nice too, for the Continuous API Management book. And now we have some time to talk. So it's good to be here. It's good to see you again. So how was your time here at O'Reilly so far?
It was very good. I really enjoyed this conference. I actually really like the New York version of it. It's grown. So I was just talking to some people here. More attendees, more sponsors. So that's a really good sign. A lot of microservices and a lot of migration talks, which I thought was pretty interesting. Along with the API session I did, the half day, I did a talk yesterday on on migration of services. So that was pretty well attended too. So it's a pretty good conference. I learn a lot. I get to meet a lot of smart folks. So it's always a chance for me to figure out what's really going on. It's a great way to start the year. Here it is towards the end of February. So I had a good time.
Okay. That's good to hear. So since you mentioned microservices, and so let's start with that. So I'm always a little bit surprised, so to speak, when I read these reports right now that talk about how many services are going to be containerized already or in the near future. So I'm wondering, what's your opinion on that, to me, amazing level of containerization that's going on? Like, do you see it in the same way? Do you see a lot of value being created, or do you see any possible problems with it?
Yeah, so most of the customers I work with, containerization is not on the near-term roadmap. And for many of them, it's not even in the experimental stage yet. They have so many other things to do in sort of normalizing their existing services. Maybe they're still continuing to break up monoliths or sort of rearrange their platform in some way that the containerization movement really hasn't hit yet. And even when you think about a lot of the sort of leaders in the industry, the Netflixes and all these other ones, they're still all just working on their own container notions too, or they kind of have their own proprietary versions of those things, right? So I think if you're platforming, I think if you're Heroku or Azure or Google, this containerization is super important because that's really how you get scale. But for most of the enterprises I'm working with, they're not scaling consumption of compute. They're actually scaling their services themselves, and containers hasn't helped a lot. Now I do have several of them that are working on cloud, so they're sort of indirectly containerized, right? So if you do something on Azure, you're really building a container, but they're not sort of running their own container management internally. I don't have any customers, and it may be self-selecting, but I don't have any customers that are spending a great deal of time on Kubernetes yet, for example.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I've definitely spoken to some where I was surprised to hear that they are looking into containers. I was wondering that maybe some other things you also might want to address, but...
So when you talk to them, are they telling you, like, what's the value add? What is the container giving them, or what's the motivation on that?
I think that's a conversation that I still need to have. I think sometimes for them, it's just this idea that they have a monolith, so they have like definitely something that probably needs to be improved, and their idea of how that is done nowadays is containers, right? So that's kind of, it's a huge jump from, we have something that has been around for a very long time and that probably really needs some modernization, that's really hard to scale, really hard to change, like all the typical problems. And now we think that since we're investing in this anyway to modernize, containers seems to be where everybody is going, so this is what we're doing. That seems to me the trajectory.
So it's really sort of, that's how we deliver microservices. We're doing microservices, so we should be doing containers too, kind of thing. Is that sort of the way?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. Sometimes it's really, and I think that still, I mean, we have had these debates for a long time when we were in the academy, right, doing the microservices talks, talking about the book, right, that like for some people, microservices and containers are kind of synonyms. And at least my impression was that we often had a hard time explaining to people that microservices do not need containers. It's a pattern you can implement in a variety of ways, and containers are one specific way how you do that. But I think a lot of people still have this idea that when you do microservices, containers are the way to do it. And they don't think about some of the complexities that come with that, and they don't think about whether they really need maybe all the fancy value propositions that you get from a full containerization.
Yeah, I think to borrow a meme, I used to have a microservices problem, now I added containers. Now I have 2 microservices problems, right?
Oh.
So I think it adds a level of complexity that I'm not sure people sort of sort through, and it sort of breaks a rule that I learned from Adrian Cockcroft when he was at Netflix. He said, we only change one thing at a time. So I think the idea of changing from monolith to microservice is a really expensive change. Changing from your own VMs or one rack IU instances to containers is also another big change, and it may not be good to pile those on. That's sort of one of the classics when you do a lot of modernization. We're going to add a new language, we're going to add a new delivery mechanism. Yeah, so all of a sudden your odds are just plummeting when you add all these new things into the mix. So I think focusing on one at a time is super, super important.
I like what you said. I would rather maybe put it in a way like I used to have a monolith problem. Now I have 100 microservices problems.
That's much better. That's actually
I don't know, but yeah. So, but like I said, I mean, like sometimes I think there still is this idea that you can only do microservices with containers, so that's a kind of the default choice.
Yep.
And sometimes it's hard to explain to people that you might want to avoid that additional complexity unless you have a good reason to do that.
You know, you say that, and now I'm sort of going through my head. I do a training course in both APIs, like the half day, and I do a thing in microservices, and I use Heroku deployment for my services. So I'm deploying to Heroku's containers. So I might be part of the problem I'm complaining about.
Yeah, but you're not managing that infrastructure, right? That's the big. I think that is the big difference, right? Once you start thinking about, oh, I'm going to do it. Like, how hard can it be, right? It's like, well, it can be pretty hard.
Exactly.
So another question that I have is one thing that we, as a software vendor, we often get questions where customers or potential customers are asking us, how do I justify this purchase? So this whole idea of how do I put a value, like a monetary value on this investment, right? Return on investment. And the more I think about it and talk about it, the more to me it always seems like this whole idea of API value is kind of bizarre, or it's a little bit looking for value in the wrong place. Because in the end, APIs are just a way to access capabilities. So when you think about the capabilities that you're opening up, so what you actually do with APIs, maybe you can use them better, scale them better, whatever. So in the end, to my mind, I tend to think now that this whole idea of trying to put a value on APIs is strange. You should put a value on products, and then you can think about how can I improve this product so that in the end, with an API, this product gets more exposure, gets more used. Do you hear any questions around this? Like, the more companies are investing in this space, the more it seems to me you also get those questions around, well, that seems to be rather expensive. What do we get out of it? So when companies are asking you, what's your typical response to that?
Yeah, so I definitely get more questions that are related to the meme of business value, right? So what is the business value of this? I would say, though, my own experience is that both on APIs and on microservices, I usually, in my talks with companies, I say, now, this is going to be more complex than your monolith. This is going to be probably more costly to build, and it's going to be more difficult to maintain. So that's sort of the starting point. And that's when they start to say, well, hold on, I thought
want this. Give this to us.
Give us this more expensive, more complicated, harder to maintain thing. So that's usually when that comes up real quick. And but I really think that's sort of an honest approach. I mean, there is a lot more complexity and detail involved when you're adding network to so many things. So it definitely comes up. The way, I think you and I had some conversations online about this idea, like, are people actually putting value on the API? It's almost like, are they putting value on the packaging of a product, or are they putting value on the distribution of a product, right? Your product is the capability the API allows, right? I think Matt McCarty, who we used to work with, he used to say, it's not that you have an API, it's what it enables. Like, what do you what are you delivering? Are you delivering data? Are you delivering behavior? Are you delivering responsiveness? All these things. That's the value, not the API, right? Because I think that's the way to think about it. So often, when I'm working with folks, I try to get them, I use the phrase unlocking business value. Is there a value that you're trying to unlock that you have, like your behavior of your customers, your data, their experience, being where they're going to be? That's what you want to unlock. You could use an API for that, right? But I try to get them to value the capability and measure the capability. How many more customers are now accessing your account more often, or contributing more content, or making more payments with your card? That's sort of the thing you measure. And the API is just the vehicle. So I think that's about the closest I come. I can't find this API has this value kind of experience. I know some people have talked about it, and I think we've talked to some consultants maybe that say we have a sort of a value chain document or analysis we'll do for you, but I haven't gone through those, and I'm not sure where I find those things to connect. I don't know what your experience is on this.
Basically the same. I mean, all I can say, I put it a little differently. I like the saying unlock business value. I'm usually talking about approaching new markets or identifying new value chains, identifying new opportunities that you otherwise don't have, either by allowing you internally to build things faster, experiment with them, whatever, either internally or externally by being able to approach new markets, feed new channels, all the kinds of things that you can do. But in the end, like you say, it's all about the value that you can produce, and trying to put a number on an API seems a little like an odd place.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good one. It does come up a lot, that time to market, that feature to release and that sort of space. If you can shrink that by a day, if you create more agility or more safety and stability in the system so that you can build more quickly, that definitely has a value, right? So you can mark the value of improving your release time, but again, that's sort of that's the reducing cost or increasing speed rather than just having an API, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're here in New York, and it's always good to meet you. And we have our next sort of, so to speak, rendezvous would be in Taiwan. We're still that would be in April.
Yep.
We're still not quite sure whether that's going to happen. Yeah. I think right now we're looking at a maybe 50-50 chance, and it's trending downwards. Yep. So not looking great, but I hope we will have this opportunity. So where else will you be in the next couple of months?
Yeah, so I'll be at Go to Chicago in May, and I'll be doing the same workshop that I did here, which is the design and build APIs, but we're doing a 2-day in-depth, so there's lots of typing on this one. And I'll be doing a talk there as well. And then in late May or April, I'll be in Copenhagen for a Microservices conference. And I'll be talking about some of this automation of APIs, this idea of how you can start to build self-discovery and that thing into your framework. And then later in the year, I'll be in Barcelona. I think that's in the fall. So I think I'm taking a little bit of time off in the summer, a little bit, just to kind of relax. But hopefully we'll definitely get to see each other in Taiwan at the end of April, right? And we'll have to see how that goes. As long as it's safe, I'd be happy to be there with you.
Okay. And since I know you, I don't think you'll relax in the summer. So you have a book coming out, Designing and Building Great Web APIs?
Yep.
So that's finished soon.
That's finished soon.
What's the project after that?
I'm sure there is one.
Okay, there is. No, okay. I will say there's probably going to be a similar one to the Design and Build APIs. It's probably going to be one about services. So that I might start in the summer, like as you said, because that takes some time. I might start that in the summer. So it might actually focus on the idea of what is it to build out services for an enterprise, but using a lot of open standards, a lot of web style stuff that we've talked about before. So that's sort of the kernel of the idea. We're still in very early stages of figuring out what would be interesting, what's going to be useful, but it will reflect a little bit of the next sort of stage. What we were talking about is services and deployment and autonomy and connections, and we'll kind of see how that goes. But that'll probably be the next one.
Okay, good. I just wanted to see, maybe to find out what's happening there in the future.
You have a project as well going.
Yeah, so I'll be working on a book about API guidelines, right? So that has been dear to my heart, and that's something they're actually right here, right? That's O'Reilly conference. So I think now actually it's kind of in the, how would you say, in the bag, at least the project. So now I need to start working on it. It'll take a little while. Definitely for me, it was very, like the last book we wrote together, that was great. Yep. It was always easier, I think, to write with others. But it'll be interesting to try to do one on my own.
Yeah, we talked about that. There's a challenge when you're just sort of on your own. For me, it's like I have to exercise on my own. I don't have like a support group kind of thing. When I'm writing with you, there's more like, no, we have to get together, we have to meet up, we have to get something done. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm looking forward to your book. We've talked about a lot of the things. Some of this stuff I think never made it into the APIs book, right?
Oh yeah.
You've been building on this stuff for quite a while, so I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
So, okay, great. So thanks a lot for joining me here. And I'm looking forward to our next meeting, to our next conversation. Yep. So thanks a lot for listening, and tune in again, I think, on the next episode, which will be around, I don't know yet what it will be about, so, but it'll be up soon. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.